You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Incoming transmission.
To the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Oh, yes indeed, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the new conservative resistance does indeed begin right here, right now, with you. You are listening to, and hopefully watching, the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network, and we are back. Had to take a little bit of time for some introspection, miss a week of the show, and I do apologize to everybody who that may have inconvenienced for not seeing my handsome smiling visage on your Facebook every Sunday afternoon. But, as I wrote in my letter that you can find on theholonet.com, it's time for change. We really do have to ask ourselves, what are we accomplishing in today's world? Are we succeeding in generating conversation? Or are we hitting a brick wall and just bouncing off of our own echo chambers? What's going on in the world of compromise and in the world of politics? Is it even possible any longer? And that's what this week brought me to the attempted détente of President Trump. President Trump, if you go to Reuters, link will be in the description. President Trump floated a rather generous proposal across the aisle this past week. Actually, it was just yesterday, but he'd been working on it for a little while. It breaks down to wall for DACA. Now, this is something that could really, really put off a lot of the base. This is something that could infuriate many dyed-in-the-wool Trump supporters, especially here in Arizona, and other places like Southern California, Texas, along the border, where it's the general feeling that there should be no quarter granted, there should be no type of amnesty, there should be no consideration given for the DREAM Act, because it was an unlawful order executed by President Barack Obama. But the president floated across the following proposal. This is what he outlined according to Reuters. $5.7 billion to add 230 miles of steel barrier along the border. This is not concrete wall. This is semi-transparent steel barrier where there's the cutouts every so often feet. $805 million for drug detection technology and canine units, always needed at the border. $800 million in humanitarian assistance for migrants. How's that for a bone to throw to the other side? The hiring of an additional 2,750 border agents and supporting personnel. And $563 million in funding for the immigration court system and the hiring of 75 new judges in order to move the system along and decrease the amount of time it takes to adjudicate an asylum claim. I mean, that makes sense. 3 years of legal protections for the so-called Dreamers. Now, this is whether they signed up for protections in the past or not. This is a group of about 700,000 immigrants who entered the country illegally as children. Dreamers, who are mostly Hispanic young adults, who were given the protection from deportation under the DACA executive order, which President Trump rescinded, are covered under that. Now, 3 years of extended protections for temporarily protected status recipients. This is like your Guatemalan people, your Hondurans, your Salvadoranians, this is a group of about 300,000 nationals from designated countries affected by armed conflict, national disaster, or strife. So this is what the Trump administration has floated out there as what on the surface and through the eyes of somebody looking at this through the lens of history will look like a very reasonable, very generous concession on the part of the White House. But point blank, we've reached the point here in the United States, and our cousins over the pond in the UK have reached it as well, where there is no longer room for compromise. Where there can be no compromise at all. Nancy Pelosi made as much clear when she preempted the president's speech and said flatly there would be no deal. This is exactly what they're experiencing in the UK with Brexit, and why Prime Minister Theresa May is fighting for her political life, and why the clock is ticking to a no-deal Brexit. It is a sickness that has afflicted the East and the West. Europe, the UK, the United States. We are all succumbing to it. Every Western democracy in the world right now is at loggerheads. It's not a question of are we going to see some gigantic global catastrophe of war? No, it's how many of them are we going to see? Because the social order is breaking down in easily half a dozen major Western nations. In France, right now, as we speak, President Emmanuel Macron is continuing to weather the storm of massive protests coming from the yellow vests. These are ordinary citizens of France whose escalating series of demands have gone largely unopposed by Macron's government because he can't stand up to them at this point. I mean, it was first about a fuel tax. Now they're talking about wanting to tax the rich in France. Go to the fact page here. I'm going to go picture-in-picture real fast for people on the live stream. This is the Reuters story. Again, link will be in the description. It's a fact box. What's in Trump's immigration offer to end the U.S. shutdown? And as I said, Theresa May is in just every bit the same amount of trouble. Just every bit as much trouble. She lost a catastrophic vote in Parliament, and there's no solution to this problem, according to The Guardian. Now, France is scrambling to see what they have to do when Britain leaves the EU. Germany is now scrambling. It all tracks back to the central question that I hoped we could tackle on the HoloNet. And that question, it has always been, is compromise even possible? Or have we reached a point in human history where we no longer even recognize our political opponents as human? Do we see the humanity in each other? Is there any honesty or any validity in political practice any longer? You don't have to look very far to see what's blowing up right now. The Catholic students, this nothing story, the Catholic students this weekend, who, according to the press, according to the media, trying to gin up clicks and popularity, they ran with this if true story that a bunch of teenagers in MAGA hats accosted some Native American protesters at the March for Life, which has been soundly stricken down as a complete and total fabrication. We go back a week to BuzzFeed having the apparent smoking gun on the Trump administration. Except, wait a second, that story actually is by the same authors that actually brought us the Steele dossier. So where do we go from here? I open it to you. And leave me your comments in the field below. Is there even the possibility of meeting in the middle any longer? Because my view is this. If President Trump backs down at this point from building the wall, if he caves to reactivating the government, to reopening the government, he's done in 2020. He's finished as president. Because his credibility will be completely gone. The media, as it sits today, their credibility is already shot. The last week should be the final nail in the coffin for any credibility that the media ever hoped to drag out of 2016, 2017, 2018. Because it's been just the most shameful, the most pitiful display of overwhelming bias. Time magazine 6 hours ago said the UK is facing a political tsunami if Brexit is halted. This is where I say we have to watch both sides of the Atlantic right now, because very, very similar, parallel events are occurring. If President Trump fails to deliver the wall, the political fallout will be devastating. The GOP will be destroyed for any possibility of re-election in the foreseeable future. In the UK, if they fail to deliver on Brexit, then you will see the same result. Conservatives will be unable to hold office in the UK any longer. The existence of the Conservative Party is drawn into question. The same is true here in the United States for the Republicans. And it happened side by side at the same time. At the same time, you had the overwhelming vote for Brexit. You had the overwhelming electoral college win for President Trump. I know he didn't win a popular vote. Popular votes don't matter in the United States. But he won the election and tilted the table completely. He overturned what the press thought would be a walk for Hillary Clinton. So his shocking victory and Brexit's shocking victory. So the dual concepts of British sovereignty and American sovereignty, that at the end of the day is what we are fighting for right now, is sovereignty. At the end of the day, at the end of all of it, this breaks down to national and individual sovereignty. Brexiteers in the UK believe in the national sovereignty of the United Kingdom and reclaiming that from the EU. In the United States, Trump supporters, Republicans, conservatives believe in the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the United States. And we also believe in the individual sovereignty. Not sovereign citizens movement, mind you, because Lord knows you don't want to be lumped in with those nut jobs, but the sovereignty of your own integrity against government socialism, against cradle-to-grave government programs, against the universal basic income propositions that are coming forward, against the Green New Deal coming from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The battle of the 21st century is for sovereignty. Make no mistake. And here in the United States and over there in the UK is where the hammer is falling. And if we should blink, if we should fail, this is where it ends, kids. I had some introspection. I had some time to think about what I want to accomplish with the HoloNet and how the format of this podcast, of this show, needs to change, what I need to do differently. And you know what? Just sitting here, pulling up these sites that I have on my page, Reuters, The Blaze, Breitbart, Drudge, and just rolling through the news of the week isn't going to cut it anymore, guys. It's not going to do. We are fighting now for our sovereign right to exist as a nation. Because a nation without borders is no nation at all. In the UK, they're fighting for the same thing. So that needs to be the new theme for the HoloNet. We're fighting for the Constitution. We're fighting for the sovereignty of the United States of America. And we need to do everything we can to aid our allies in their own battles for sovereignty in their home nations. I wrote, and I covered this a couple of months ago, that President Trump has reappropriated the term nationalism. And he did. He reappropriated the term nationalism, and he seized on it and said we need to take it back. Well, we need to reappropriate the term sovereignty. Individual sovereignty, national sovereignty, in the face of the nanny state takeover on an individual basis, and in the face of globalism in the international sense. We need to push back against any supranational entities. The EU, for example. The TPP, for example. NAFTA. This is the battle of our time. If you are against the government running your life even on a local level, then you are fighting for your own freedom and your own sovereignty. If you are against globalist government, and you are fighting for the existence of your nation, then this is your fight. And we have to stand in it together. So that is what I'm going to reestablish the HoloNet to do. We need to stand and fight. And that's what every episode of this show is going to be about. How do we hold that line? Because it's become increasingly obvious to me that no middle ground is there to be had. They're not listening anymore. No one on the left wants to listen to someone on the right. No one on the right wants to listen to somebody on the left. You know what I did this week? I was listening to Joe Rogan. You want to talk about a crazy guy. Crazy in all the right ways. Joe Rogan. He's not for everybody. There's a lot of cussing on there, a lot of drug references, but you get some interesting conversation, some interesting talk, and that I'll give him a lot of credit for that. But I listened to Joe Rogan just to get out of my own echo chamber, just to get out of my own views, and that's healthy. Sorry, I got an itchy nose. But the more I've thought about it and the more I've listened to, the more I realize the fight in front of us is too big. The stakes are too high. And we have to stand up for ourselves now. If President Trump backs down on this most basic requirement of having a sovereign nation, then what are we fighting for? What are we seeking to conserve? To quote Dr. David Azarad from his speech at Wall Builders, which, by the way, Stephen Airy from Defenders of American Exceptionalism and I, we did a really awesome takedown analysis of that. If you want to listen to that, you can check that out on Defenders of American Exceptionalism on Mojo 50. So I strongly recommend that. But what are we conserving? Are we conserving a free country, or are we conserving the shadow of a free country? The hollowed out husk of a free country as conservatives. If we don't stand for the Constitution, if we don't stand for our rights as individuals, if we are not standing for our rights as a nation in the community of nations, then what are we conserving? What are we doing? Everything else is secondary. And it really pains me to say that because I have some good friends who are right now in a bad way due to the government shutdown. They're government employees. I guess they were classed as non-critical, and as a result, they're in some real hard times right now. So it hurts my heart to see them having to go through this. But at the same time, there is no greater fight to be had. Are we going to conserve a free nation, a sovereign nation, or do we hold the United States as being equivalent to every other country in the world, regardless of their cultural validity, cultural value, economic value? Do we hold that America is exceptional, or do we admit that it's not? That is the fight of 2019. Is America exceptional, or isn't it? Is America a sovereign nation, or isn't it? And do you care either way? As if you don't care, find another podcast to listen to, honest to God, because I don't know how you got here in the first place if you really don't care. Chat's open right now. We're live streaming on YouTube, and we'll be uploading to... live streaming on Facebook. We'll be uploading to YouTube and BitChute later. If you want to follow us, we are on the Twitters at the HoloNet, on Facebook.com/HoloNet, HoloNet.lanterns.buzz, and theHoloNet.com. You can also find us on Subscribestar if you want to support the podcast. But this is the direction that I'm going to be taking the show into. Calling out what has to be done. We need to make a difference. And if this show is making a difference, if we're calling out truths that exist, then we're going to keep it going. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to become just another conservative talk box, not just another random right-leaning podcast. You either have to be about something or you'll fall for anything. Stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So we're going to stand for the Constitution. We're going to stand for the sovereignty of the United States. And that's the stand we're going to make here at the HoloNet. And that's what today's show is about. About reaffirming that promise to you. Stay tuned, take a quick break, be right back.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Allied reinforcements had arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. From Phoenix, Arizona, I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Thanks for sticking in. Did want to put this up on the big screen here so I can show you guys. I want to show you the different realities that we currently live in. There are two different universes right now that both exist within the United States. Because, you know, our universe is defined by our perspective. So on one side, on the left side of your screen, you have Breitbart News. On the right side, you have Reuters. Reuters headline: Students in Trump hats mock Native Americans, school apologizes. Reuters: a Catholic school in Kentucky condemned a group of its students, many of whom wore Make America Great Again hats, after they were recorded harassing a Native American Vietnam veteran in a video that went viral on Saturday. The students from the private, all-male, toxic masculinity, Covington Catholic High School in northern Kentucky were in Washington for an anti-abortion rally on Friday. I love how they downplay the March for Life. The anti-abortion rally on Friday, when they were filmed surrounding Nathan Phillips and mocking the Native Americans singing and drumming. One teen in particular is seen standing in front of Phillips, staring into his face with a smile. Fellow students, many in clothing bearing President Donald Trump's MAGA slogan, cheered him on and chanted, "Build that wall, build that wall." Footage was shared online by organizers of an Indigenous Peoples March, which also took place on Friday. It goes on to say how the school condemned them and they're probably facing disciplinary measures from the school. Now we go to Breitbart. Breitbart reports critics push back against media reports Covington Catholic High School students racist toward Native American drummer. So they say, if you read the headline from the Associated Press, The Hollywood Reporter, repeated in some form by outlets across the country, read, students in Make America Great Again hats mock Native Americans after Washington rally. CNN declared teens in Make America Great Again hats taunted a Native American elder at the Lincoln Memorial. The viral video showed a group of male students cavorting on the steps of Lincoln Memorial as a Native American man beating a drum walked toward them. The students' gestures were perceived as mocking him. Media pundits pounced on the students. Slate said that the student portrayed in the video harassed the Native American and had a face of self-satisfaction, certitude, and let me see what that criticism and edginess expressed as cruelty. It linked the incident to President Donald Trump's criticism of Senator Elizabeth Warren for her claims of Native American heritage. Bill Kristol, prominent critic of Donald Trump, tweeted Trump should condemn the school. Tweets. Writer at the National Review declared students might as well spit on the cross, and you get all these condemnations. The video was posted by a group of left-wing activists, which showed that the students had been taunted with racial slurs as the incident took place. Wait a minute, what? Hang on. Other video evidence showed the Native American drummer approaching the students rather than the opposite. One student who was there wrote to a local news outlet begging it to tell the full story about what happened in the march, and this is the full story, the new narrative that they give. I am a student at Covington Catholic and was present at the occurrence. Here is what truly happened. In the midst of our cheers, we were approached by a group of adults led by Nathan Phillips, with Phillips beating his drum. They forced their way into the center of our group. We initially thought this was a cultural display since he was beating along to our cheers, and so we clapped to the beat. However, after multiple minutes of Mr. Phillips beating his drum directly in the face of my friend, mere centimeters from his nose, we became confused and started wondering what was happening. It was not until later that we discovered they would incriminate us as a publicity stunt. To reiterate, we did not partake in any physical or verbal abuse. After that initial occurrence, we were verbally assaulted by 4 or 5 African-American men who called us and berated one of our African-American students for being friends with us. The truth needs to come out. I pray that you read this. So, folks, this is a shining example of the dual universes that exist right now. There's the universe as perceived by folks on the left. There's the universe as perceived by folks on the right. The trouble here is that the mainstream media is fully in the camp of the left. So if you look at America and the world in general as just percentages based on political affiliation, there's 30% on each side who are pretty extreme on either side. And then there's 40% in the middle. Okay? And usually the top 10% on either side are just absolutely irrevocably locked into their views. Then you have about 20% whose moves are a little malleable on each side. And then you have 40% in the middle who either lean one way or lean the other, but by and large can be swayed. The difficulty here is the mainstream media has access to not just the 30% on the left, or even just 20% of the middle. They have access to 30% of the left and like 30% of the middle. So they have about 60% are going to see things through the lens that the left and the mainstream media present, and this is where we run into the problem that we're all speaking the same language, but we're reporting on the same event in totally opposite ways. We are presenting narratives and counter-narratives. That's all that it is. In any given event of any national import, you can do this. You can pull up a story from Breitbart and a story from Reuters or AP or the New York Times or the Washington Post. It doesn't even have to be Breitbart. It could be the Washington Examiner. It could be the Blaze. It could be anything. Any right-wing news source versus any left-wing or mainstream news source. It used to be just like the left-wing news sources like HuffPo, but now it's also the mainstream. And you will see completely different narratives of the same event. And the truth lies in between. Now, when I was a kid and I was learning about journalism, this happened, but it didn't seem to be quite as severe. Now, it is so diametrically opposite that how can there be compromise? How can there be any kind of across-the-aisle cooperation when we don't live in the same country? If perception is reality, we do not live in the same country as the left right now. The right and the left inhabit the same space and time, but view the universe through such a different paradigm that we might as well live in separate countries, except that we have to deal with the consequences of the actions or inactions of the other side. And we find them so incomprehensible, so alien to us, so counter to all of the information that we have instantaneous cognitive dissonance. You can't even begin to think how somebody from the other side, how their mind operates. So you dehumanize them. They're crazy or they're stupid. And this is why compromise may be impossible at this point. So if compromise is impossible, what is left for us to do? But to dig our heels in and hold the line and not cast stones. Dig our heels in, stand up, hold what you got. For us to reemerge on the battlefield of ideas victorious, we have to demonstrably prove that our methods are better, that our concepts are more sound, and do it in such a way that is so indefatigable, so undeniable, that the other side has to accede to it. This is why the wall is so critical. It is my belief that building a physical fortification on our southern border, wherever is geographically possible, pumping additional money into the enforcement of the border, will bring down crime and will have the positive results that the people on the right are espousing. And that is why it is so dangerous to leftist sources and leftist media for that to happen. Because then you have something tangible. Then you have something indefatigable, something undeniable that proves conservatives were right. And that can't be allowed to happen. That is why the left will not give an inch. Because if they do, if we are successful in closing off the southern border, in securing the border, and then you see the dip in crime, then you see the dip in drugs getting into the country, the improvement of situations along the southern border, it lets the air out. It takes their gas away. They cannot allow the light of truth to get through, because it destroys their meticulously built web of lies. The same goes when we're talking about Brexit. Brexit in the UK cannot be allowed to happen, according to Labour and according to the Europhiles and EU bureaucracy. It cannot be permitted to occur, because once it occurs and nothing terrible happens, all their credibility is destroyed. We're even seeing that now with the government shutdown. The world has failed to end due to the government shutdown. And that's a huge problem for people on the left and big government people on the right. That's a gigantic problem for them. The people that scream every day how we cannot live without government, how we depend on government for our very survival. When the clock ticks over another day of the government being shut down, and there are no bodies in the streets, and the cityscapes aren't burning, every day of this shutdown proves the innecessity of so large a government apparatus. This is a great week, a great month for our libertarian friends, because we're proving every day that we can function as a nation safely and well with a fraction of the government expenditure that Washington demands. When you see philosophically that one side of an argument depends on the absence of proof, that experimentation and the scientific method is denied, that tells you all you need to know. So let's be analytical about this. Let's say you are a scientific person and you believe very much in the scientific method. So you develop a thesis. You have a theory. You want to prove your theory. Theory. The safety of the United States will be enhanced by the construction of border fortifications and the enhancement of border security. That's theory. Your proof would be to have walls in some areas and not have walls in others. Now, in areas where border fortifications have been completed, we have seen decreases in illegal border crossings and drug smuggling. So that would seemingly, in an A-B comparison, areas that do have the wall versus areas that don't have the wall, prove that building a wall makes sense. But in order for that to work, you have to be willing to accept data that is contrary to your preconceived views. You have to be willing to accept a different outcome. That is our problem. Is that there is no one seemingly left in the Western world who is willing to honestly test out a theory and then change their views as the facts dictate. Their conception is that the facts must change to suit our views, rather than that views must change in the face of new facts. Orwell said, "He who controls the past controls the future." And if you can write the history books that these experiments never succeeded, if you can control what people accept as facts in real time, like the media can, then you can control all of the outcomes, can't you? But there's a problem. The problem is that the media is losing control of the flow of information, as evidenced by the existence of this little podcast, the existence of Lantern's Buzz, all the other smaller media outlets that are burgeoning and growing on the internet. We are their problem. We are outlets that they cannot control, presenting facts and opinions of our own. And facts don't care about your feelings, as the inimitable Daily Caller tells us. Ben Shapiro. So a lot of things going on this week that we need to keep our eyes open to. We need to keep our eyes open to everything that moves in relation to President Trump and the border. It seems now that the left is becoming quite desperate, pulling out all the stops. First, the BuzzFeed smoking gun that wasn't. Now this recent debacle about the Catholic school students in Kentucky. It would appear that the media has gone to full attack mode now, where anyone on the right is a target. Because taking down one of us can take down all of us. That anyone who wears a MAGA hat or espouses a conservative viewpoint, if they can be brought down and laid low, then they can take the entire conservative movement with them. I don't know. Me, I don't frankly think I'm that important. But you never can tell. So, this is the comeback for the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Know we were gone for a little bit, but anything worth presenting to you is worth taking the time to examine and weighing and measuring against the amount of time, energy, and effort put in. Any podcast or any outlet that doesn't do this type of introspection from time to time, I wouldn't feel it deserving of your time. Now, some of them, large operations, multi-person operations, can do it without pumping brakes. And I laud them, and I envy them that. Unfortunately, as a one-man show, I don't always have that opportunity. So I thank you for your patience. And I hope that the new direction I've decided to head in is one that you'll want to join me on. Now, as the calendar has opened up at Lanterns, and as the schedule is a bit more flexible now, I'm going to be looking at different time slots where I can better serve you, where I can reach you at a better time of your day and of your week than Sunday afternoons. So stay tuned for that. There may be additional changes coming to our timeline and to our slot. So if that's the case, the goal will always be to bring you the most up-to-date information, the most impactful information, so that if we do continue to just, go over the news and post what amount to basically response videos and response podcasts, giving you the other side of each story, or pointing out the differences between the two and allowing you to make your own decision, like we did with the Breitbart and Reuters comparison there, I think that's a noble pursuit. Because we have to stand our ground, as I said, on the Constitution and on the sovereign right of the United States to exist as a free nation, and our sovereign rights as individuals to exist as free men and women. And we have to be informed in order to make that happen. We have to realize that what we're being spoon-fed by the media bears examination. And what is being spoon-fed to us by the right as well, some outlets on the right, also bears the same scrutiny. The days for simply accepting what you read and what you're told are long over. Now it is going to be very hard to be an American. Because critical thinking, exhaustive critical thinking, needs to be applied to everything you digest. Every piece of information, every story, every article, every picture, every video. Because we're getting to the point where you can fake anything now. You can fake photos, you can take very deceptive videos based on angles, you can even Photoshop it. I mean, I'm going to be buying some equipment where I don't have so crappy a background, okay? I'm not going to be taking a video in front of a dressing barrier anymore, 2 flags hung on it, because I'm able to acquire the technology where I can do green screen, and it's going to look cool. And I am throwing like no money at this. This is like a gift card that I got for Christmas. So, our ability to trust what we see on social media, in YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, CBS, NBC, Fox, is gone. There can be no compromise because there is no longer a shared reality. We have to get back onto the same plane of existence before we can even talk about coming together on anything. We have to agree that up is up and down is down, water is wet, fire burns, and gravity is a thing that exists. Because if we can't agree on those basic precepts, if we can't agree on what the truth is, of what facts are, then how do we agree about the really important stuff? It's the march for life, and many Americans can't agree on where you define life as beginning. Does life begin at conception? Does life begin when your fully formed, viable body leaves your mother's womb? My belief is around conception. Yours may vary. But when we can't even agree on that, we can't even agree on that, we have a long way to go. Well, folks, on that note, good night. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. From Phoenix, I'm Matt Holloway.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.